Because if you don't try to be a great leader, or try to succeed, or try to get that award, or then you're a little worried you're not going to get it, or you won't succeed. And so it requires the courage to trust that you're good enough. You're good enough as a person, as a leader. You're good enough that if you work hard on things you care about that have an impact in the world where the world needs it, and that you treat the people around you with respect, that everything will work out. There's a leap of faith in that.
Yes.
And it's worth it.
Welcome to another episode of peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Neha Murthy, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM, that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest. Peter Bregman is the CEO of Bregman Partners Inc., a company that strengthens leadership in people and in organizations through programs. He is the author of several award-winning and bestseller books featured on PBS, ABC, and CNN. He is a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Forbes, National Public Radio, Psychology Today, and CNN. Welcome, Peter. We are thrilled to have you.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here with you.
So the first question I had for you, Peter, was could you walk through us a little bit about your journey and what inspires you and what kind of experiences have shaped your thinking?
So, I don't even, as I listen to that question, I sort of think there's a million different directions that we can go. But I started my journey actually very young in politics. And I did a lot of work in politics, but then I got disillusioned very quickly. And when I was in college, I didn't quite know what to do. Like, I was a very good debater, and I knew how to make the other side look stupid, which was sort of what the job was of the debater. And then I realized, but I wasn't going to learn anything. Like, I'm going to be in college, and I'm just going to, try to get everybody to believe what I believe. And that's not the point of college. And so I didn't quite know how to be in politics and not try to win and make everybody believe what I believe. So I stepped out of it completely. And I really didn't know what to do. And I was in college, and I asked my father for advice. And I said, I'm thinking about maybe going to France and studying in France for a little while. It was probably my freshman year. I was at Princeton. It was my freshman year at Princeton. And he said, is there something that is drawing you to France that you want to study, a professor, something that you want to study in France? Or are you just bored at Princeton and you're looking for something to excite you? Because if you're bored, you're going to face that the rest of your life. Figure it out where you are. Don't go run to something else. Figure it out where you are. And it was really terrific advice from my father. And I stayed. And I, from there, by accident, I went on a camping trip. It's a long story, but it wasn't my goal. But I went on a camping trip, and I fell in love with it. And it was a trip to train people to lead trips. And I kind of lied to get in. I was supposed to have experience camping. I'd never had any experience camping. I wore all the wrong things. It rained for 6 days. I was in cotton, which is, they sort of say cotton kills. And because when it doesn't hold any warmth when it's wet, and because it rained the whole time. People lent me clothing. People were really, like, it was just the kindness and the connection. And I just fell in love with it. And so I found sort of my new calling in that way. And I started doing outdoor leadership, and I started leading expeditions, mountaineering and kayaking and climbing, wilderness expeditions, teaching people leadership on these expeditions. I worked for Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School and with Outward Bound. And then eventually I started my own company, and I did work with a consulting company called the Hay Group We did work together on an amazing project that blew us all out of the water. I mean, we just were amazed at it. Was Parenthood was in the middle of infight government rules, and over 4 days, we brought people from from this kind of stance and really angry with each other to unifying behind a common mission. And it was amazing. And they asked me to come and join them and start a practice with a number of other consultants. Beth Fletcher was the leader. And it was called Hey Alliances, to drive transformational change in organizations. And I did that for 4 years. I did an executive MBA. This might be too much detail. You asked, sorry. I did an executive MBA, and then I joined Accenture for a year. And I learned a lot, but it wasn't the right environment for me. And then I started my current company, Bregman Partners, which is really focusing on coaching CEOs and leadership teams. That's kind of how I got here.
Wow, that's an interesting journey you've had.
It's deeply unstrategic. It's, I didn't set out on this journey. It's, I kind of keep having experiences and I'm drawn to them and they move me and I move with them. And I try to be successful in what I do, but I don't have some grand plan. I'm following my interest and my passion with an eye towards what I can build and how I can have an impact.
The passion is what it drives.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I was curious to know more about your phenomenal book, Leading with Emotional Courage. So how can one muster emotional courage?
Well, so let's first define emotional courage, right? So sort of what is emotional courage? So emotional courage is the willingness to feel, right? And a lot of people think in order to act, sometimes you have to not feel. You just have to drive through. You have to make things happen. You have to stop feeling. But our resistance to feeling, our unwillingness to feel, our fear of feeling things stops us from moving forward. And we'll do a little experiment. I'll do it with you and everybody who's listening or watching. Think of a difficult conversation that you're not having, right? A conversation that you know you should have, it's on your mind, but you haven't raised it, you haven't had it. I'm not going to make you say it out loud, but do you have one in your mind? Think of a conversation. So think for a second, and everybody listening, think for a second of a conversation you know you should have, but you keep putting it off. You procrastinate on it.
Yeah.
Okay, you have one in your mind?
Mostly when we are like in a group.
Well, you don't have to even tell me. I don't want to embarrass you, or I don't want you to have to. You don't have to tell me. But do you have one in your head that you're thinking of? Okay, great. So I want you to consider these 4 questions. Do you know everything you need to know to have that conversation? I'm betting the answer is yes, right? Are you skilled enough to have that conversation? I haven't spent a lot of time with you, but I already know that you're skilled enough to have that conversation, right? I know enough about you to know that you're skilled enough. Have you had time and opportunity to have those conversations? So that's usually what we try to solve for. We try to solve for knowledge and skill and time and opportunity. We do time management. I've written books about time management. I've written books about, skills and breaking habits. I've written books about all this stuff. So that's what we try to do. We try to solve for knowledge, skill, time, and opportunity. But you have all of that and you haven't followed through on the conversation. So what's getting in the way? And what's getting in the way is there's something you would have to feel if you had that conversation. You might have to feel their hurt or their anger. You might have to feel shame, your own or theirs, embarrassment. They might get passive aggressive afterwards, and you might have to feel that weird kind of passive aggressive discomfort. I don't know what you'd have to feel, but you'd have to feel something. Maybe while you're having the conversation, maybe after. And because of that, you don't follow through on having the conversation. And if you are willing to feel everything, this is the premise behind emotional courage. If you are willing to feel everything, the shame, the embarrassment, the anger, the hurt, the passive aggressiveness, the defensiveness, if you're willing to feel everything, then you can do anything. Then you can move forward on everything. It is not hard to get the knowledge, skill, time, and opportunity. The hard part is to feel the stuff you'd have to feel in order to move forward. So in a nutshell, emotional courage is developing our willingness and ability to feel everything we need to feel in order to do everything that we really need to do.
That's so insightful. I mean, yeah, it all it takes is just one, that the push of emotional courage
Right.
for your thoughts to come in play.
Right. And it's not easy because you have to feel things. But when you are emotionally courageous, when you are willing to feel, then you could do physically courageous things.
True. That's so true.
Mhm.
So, moving on to the next question, what I had was, what would you like to advise the young entrepreneurs aspiring to be the next leaders in business?
Here's what I would say. Don't aspire to be the next leaders in business. Aspire to do something that adds value in the world, that has an impact, that you care deeply about. And then you will become the next leaders in business. But if you try to become the next leaders in business, it's going to be about you and your ego, and you're going to get in your own way. So instead of trying to become the next leaders of business, try to have an impact on the world in a way that you care about. Reinhold Niebuhr, the theologian, I think it was Reinhold Niebuhr, who said, a calling, like God's calling, a calling is when the intersection, when your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. When your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. So find that place. Find that place where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. And then spend your time there and have an impact there. Don't worry about being the next great business leader. Like, worry about that. And if you do that well, you may be the next great business leader. I don't know. But no matter what, you will be happy, fulfilled, and you will make an impact. And maybe you'll be, but the problem with people who pursue or aspire to be the next great business leader is they do all sorts of things that they don't particularly want to do to get there. Chances of getting there are actually pretty slim. And then you've spent your life doing things you don't want to do in order to achieve a goal that you haven't achieved. And that's kind of a wasted life. So don't waste your life. Do what you love in a way that fulfills a need in the world, and be excellent at it, and work hard at it, and enjoy yourself. And then you'll either be a leader or not.
Yes. So it's like putting your heart into it and doing what you like love to do the most. And it
Yeah,
will find a way.
and enjoying the journey, as opposed to just worrying about this destination that is elusive and maybe not that important. But if you want it, that's fine. You can still get there. But you probably won't get there by focusing on getting there.
True. That's insightful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, in that case, do you think companies can be a role model?
So absolutely. I'm in a few days going to be speaking with John Mackey, who is the CEO of Whole Foods and who wrote the book Conscious Capitalism, right? And Conscious Capitalism is a great book, and it's about the various stakeholders in capitalism. So, most people, when they think of running a company, they think it's all about profitability, right? It's all about the shareholders. But he says, no, it's not. It's about the shareholders, and it's about the employees, and it's about the customers, and it's about the environment, and it's about the broader population. And there's a tremendous number of stakeholders who are critical to serve as a company. So how do I think companies can be role models? I think companies can be role models by worrying less about their competitive place in the world. And yes, like the same thing I've said about people. Now I understand your question better. The same thing I said about people is the same for companies, which is not only to to relax their competitiveness and try to solve problems that matter in the world, that they're good at solving, that will have an impact on the world. And if you do that as a company, thinking about all of your stakeholders, thinking about your impact on shareholders and employees and customers and the environment and the economy and like all of these things, like being responsible as you walk through the world, then you'll be a business leader. Your company will be a role model if it's responsible and accountable.
Yes, that's true. So, while like if you want to be a role model, how will you like a brand can be how can organizations deliver a meaningful employer brand?
So, I think I'm going to sound a little repetitive, but I think like you deliver a meaningful brand when it's honest, when there's integrity to the brand, and when it's courageous. So decide what you care about as a company, focus on that, neglect everything else, right? Neglect everything else. Don't try to focus on everything. Focus on the one thing you can really impact, the one thing that you think will make the biggest difference, the one place where it's the intersection between your greatest joy and in a company's perspective, it's also the greatest competence, like what you're here to solve, what you're here to do, fulfilling a need, and be excellent at it and work really hard. And then you're taking care of your brand. There are so many companies like people who focus on wanting to be a great leader without actually really wanting to be responsible in the way that they lead. It's the same thing with brands wanting to be like really well-known brands without necessarily being sort of thoughtful or responsible or consistent or aligned or have integrity with who they are as a company. And a great brand isn't a fictitious creation of brand managers. A great brand exists because actually leadership cares and the employees care and they're having an impact that matters, and people are then naturally attracted to that brand.
So it all sums up to being honest and being loyal about what you're doing, and that creates your own brand value.
Yeah, and I think also making some bets. Like you have to make some bets. You have to say, I'm going to focus on this and I'm not going to focus on that. And, a brand stands for something. A brand that stands for everything isn't a brand, but a brand that stands for something is a brand. I just had on my podcast, Ryan Berman, who wrote a book called Return on Courage, right? And he's a brand marketer. And he kind of really looks at courageous brands. And this was our conversation, are you willing to make this commitment, a niche focus, and really put your values down and stand behind them 100%. And, when you do that with courage, then you're describing the brand, you're creating a really powerful brand.
So moving on to the next question, what I had was, what are the unexpected places to look into while for getting great employee feedback?
This is an interesting question. So, I think a place like for the company to look into is, are we being responsible as leaders? Are we meeting the needs of employees, but not just to get great employee survey data? Like, are we taking a stand? Sometimes we're going to disappoint our employees for the right reasons. And do we stand behind that? Do we treat our employees as well as we treat ourselves? If you're asking that from a management perspective or leadership perspective, right? Do we really think of different classes of citizens of employees, the higher paid and the lower paid? Or, is there are we reserving parking spaces back, in places where there are parking spaces, for senior management, and everybody else has to figure it out? How are we treating our employees? Are we treating our employees like decent, caring, accountable, responsible people? Or are we treating them like kids that have to be kind of managed and controlled? And, I think if you do the latter, if you're treating them like kids who have to be managed and controlled, not particularly trusted, not particularly trustworthy, you're probably not going to get great employee feedback, right? But if you treat them as human beings, if you treat them as people who care about what they're doing, have values, if you care about their opinions, if you care about what they're thinking, and you care enough to try to create some processes and structures that sort of support what they need and their success from their perspective, you'll probably end up getting great employee feedback.
That's true. It's like 70% of the time employees are spending their time in the organization. So it's very necessary to make them feel like a family and to make them feel belonged, right?
Yeah, and it's not, and this is subtle, but it's not like you're making them feel like a family. They are family.
Yeah.
And so how do you treat, what do you do? Do you care if you go home and you ask your spouse or your partner, where do you want to go for dinner? Like, are you just trying to push them to go to the place you want to go to dinner? Are you trying to get buy-in for your solution? Or are you really asking the question, where do you want to go for dinner? Because you want to know where they want to go for dinner, and you want to go somewhere that would please you and them. So if we treat our employees in that same way, with that same kind of respect, then you'll end up getting great employee feedback.
That's true. That's true. It was really insightful.
Thank you.
Lastly, Peter, do you have any sound bites that you would love to leave with our audience for?
It's interesting. I'm listening to myself in this interview, and so I'm going to repeat a couple of things that come out. Like, one of them is, if you're willing to feel everything, you can do anything. That's important. I knew that soundbite going into this interview, right? I mean, it's like the basis of emotional courage. And I think, like, what is worth using emotional courage for? Like, what is it? Like, what do you want to use emotional courage for? And that's the other things that we talked about, which is like showing up with integrity in the world, which is caring about the impact you're having and working hard to have that impact, and to have joy and have fun and find that intersection, and treat the people around you with the respect that you would want to be treated with, which is sort of a platitude. It sounds so obvious, but we don't actually do that so much, because mostly we're aspiring to be a certain kind of leader. And so then we do things, we manipulate situations in order to, try to get to that place. And we might step on people because it's worth it. And like, suddenly we're doing all of these things that are against all of these platitudes that actually work, the platitudes. So it's like, show up, care about what you're doing, do something that you enjoy doing and you have fun with, treat the people around you with respect, and focus on what gives you value and what gives the world value. And then it would actually be kind of hard not to be successful.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. It's just a little courage that we need.
Exactly. That's what we need. We need the courage, because it's a risk. Because if you don't try to be a great leader, or try to succeed, or try to get that award, then you're a little worried you're not going to get it, or you won't succeed. And so it requires the courage to trust that you're good enough. You're good enough as a person, as a leader. You're good enough that if you work hard on things you care about that have an impact in the world where the world needs it, and that you treat the people around you with respect, that everything will work out. There's a leap of faith in that.
Yes.
And it's worth it.
Amazing. That was an enriching and learning experience for me. I loved the conversation throughout.
No, thank you. I loved it too. It's lovely to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
My pleasure.
Stay healthy, stay safe. We'll hope to stay in touch with you.
Thank you. I'd be happy for that. Thank you. You also stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you.